This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com. The only place to be in
as we Star Trekkies like to call it, the goatee wearing half of the world. Welcome everyone to this month's episode of Through the Looking Glass. I'm your co-host, Scott Criscuolo. Hope everyone is enjoying their June. And I'm actually been looking forward to doing this to my very good friend and co-host, because he's great. But for those of you that remember, I guess it would be we started October? So like episode 3 or 4. So like back in December, January, when this guy said it was, 95 degrees where he is, and it was 5 degrees where I was. The script has flipped. The script is flipped, but of course he'll never get 5 degrees where he is. Let me bring in, ladies and gentlemen, the always awesome Thunder from Down Under, Mr. Dave. Dave, I know for the fact that it's not 5 degrees where you are right now.
No, it's not 5 degrees. It's a bit warmer than 5 degrees. In fact, we'd be lucky to get down to 5 degrees at night, even in the middle of winter down here. But it is. We do. Thank you, Scott. It's great to be back with you guys again. It's great to be back with all our wonderful listeners, and welcome once again to another episode of Through the Looking Glass. But it is certainly colder down here than it was when we started recording. It is the middle of winter down here in Australia. And for all you fantastic North Americans, I can tell you that it is a very cool and chilly 64 degrees. When I do the comparison today, it's 18 Celsius down here today. After a pretty cold wake up this morning, I woke up this morning. It was only 48 degrees. It was pretty cold. I had to put on my beanie and my double jacket and my gloves to go out for my morning walk. So I'm feeling the cold, but I know there's a lot of you sitting out there going, "That's not cold. That's probably t-shirt weather for some of you guys." Yes. I guess
it's very tepid. That 48 would be tepid for me in February or March. But today here in the Northeast, in the other hemisphere, the last 2 days here in Connecticut, it tapped out at 93, according to my car thermometer. So 93 degrees, which Dave had 6 months ago, and I had the flip. I had flipped the numbers, or add the numbers up, and I had 12. So, yeah, a little warm the last couple of days. But actually, it's evening here. It's Sunday evening where I am, of course, where Dave is. It's Monday late morning. It's actually cooled a little bit. We're looking at, I think it's dipping slightly. I think we're up in the low 80s. But anyway, nobody wants to hear us talk the weather. Dave, always a pleasure. We have had a tremendous journey so far with all of our episodes. And again, we've got so many now, I'm not going to repeat them all. But go back to now, again, I will say this, though, for those that are new listeners, welcome to the network, PTB, to the PTB Wrestling Network, placetobe.podbean.com. We've been doing this specific show since back in October. This is episodic. This is not. This is standalones. This is not like some of our other shows like NWA Crock and Roll or Highway to the Impact Zone. Those shows you want to go back to the beginning and start. Our shows do not do that. You could listen to any of them anytime. They do not connect. So if you're listening to this show right now and this is the first episode, please keep listening. Feel free. But after this, go back to our archive. On the website, again, placetobe.podbean.com, the old PTB Wrestling Network, your old reliable. And we have shows going all the way back to October. So check them out because they're all great. And tonight's is going to be great as well. This month's episode, the topic seems easy. And I say this a lot with a few of our episodes that Dave comes up with. Sometimes it's easy. A lot of times it's not. We had I still think one of our toughest episodes that I think we did a great job on was the one back in November when we went to an alternate universe where everything in the WWF was fine in late 97 into 98 and we had no Montreal incident. I thought that was one of our best episodes because that's not an easy topic to try to talk about. This topic tonight would seem easy, but I tell you, I bet you it's not going to be because rebooking this sounds like the easiest thing on the planet. But it probably isn't. So, Dave, why don't you set the stage for us and tell us about this month's topic?
Well, this month is, as many of you, if you have been journeying with us, you know that we do try to, we try where possible to maybe pull something, an event, a storyline out of the month that we're in historically, just to give some context and to help just to provide a bit of a sound foundation. So we're in the month of June, and when those of us who've been wrestling fans for a very long time, and I know there are some people out there who've been wrestling fans for as long as we have been, Scott. I know you just a little bit older than me, just slightly, a couple more years on me, but really we've grown up with wrestling. And so throughout that time, we see the various storylines that put forward. And sometimes a storyline works. Sometimes it maybe doesn't quite connect with you as a viewer, or you feel that there's some missteps. But I think one of the noticeable things about the early years of the WWF, sort of the pre-Raw era, is that there was a lot of long-term planning that had gone in, and you could see that play out over time. Even when things might not be connecting, they had it planned out. With the rise of Raw and the monthly pay-per-views, that planning became shorter and shorter. And by the time we got to a year like, say, 1999, the rise of perhaps Vince Russo's story writing elements and influence over the company, we saw a lot of things start to play out where maybe the end goal wasn't known when they started planning their storyline. And that's where I'd like to go tonight, because I'd like us to look at a storyline, what I think is probably the first real prominent storyline in the WWF where it was very evident they did not have the end goal in mind when they started writing the storyline. Now, this was common back in WCW, NWA. Like you go back to 1988, 1989, 1990, you had multiple stories where they started doing a story and they didn't know where they were going with it or what they were going to do at the end of it. And I think the best one to recall right offhand is 1990 and Sting's World Championship reign and the whole Black Scorpion angle. I mean, it was clear they didn't know where they were going with it. Well, I think our storyline tonight is probably the WWF's first real misstep along that line, because we're going to look at tonight the storyline that had a lot of potential and possibly the biggest fizzing out reveal that had happened in the company to date. And that is the higher power. The storyline of the higher power and the reveal of Vince McMahon as the higher power. Now there's a lot we're going to look at tonight, a lot to talk about here. But we're going to have a bit of a look at what may have prompted this, what the impact of it was, and I guess in this case we're going to look at, there were certainly rumors of who might have been the higher power, even back at the time it happened. We're going to maybe have a look at who some of those people were and what it might have looked like if they had been put in the role, and whether or not it might have worked that way. And then we'll look at whether any of us have any other potential ideas for who the higher power could have been. So that's where we're going tonight. But I guess to start us off, Scott, 1999. Obviously the higher power storyline is the back end, the culmination, the final stage of the Austin McMahon storyline that had started at WrestleMania in 1998. We don't need to rehash the whole storyline, but certainly, what were your thoughts? What are your memories of Austin and McMahon, and how were you seeing that at the time? Because I know it had a massive impact on my wrestling fandom. I had been coming out of Montreal and the screw job. I had actually been a little bit down on WWF because I was such a big Bret Hart fan. And I liked Stone Cold a lot. And that was probably the only story that really kept me going. But I tell you now, the Austin McMahon storyline had a massive impact on my wrestling fandom, because for the first time, not only was Raw became available on television around that time period, it became something that you could watch, but it became something, this storyline became something that I had to watch. I needed to watch it. And it took me to the next level of I really wanted to see the next step of the storyline. And I would make sure I got my hands on that episode, the next episode of Raw. I was watching week to week, which hadn't had much of a chance, but there were times when I didn't mind if I didn't get the latest wrestling video out for a few weeks, because was it going to be worth watching? What did the internet said about it? Oh, it was an okay show. Oh, look, I might watch the newest Star Trek video episodes first, or I might go to the movies instead. But Austin McMahon really turned me around, and it brought me to a level of fandom I probably hadn't had since probably 89, 90. It really took me back to that young element which drew me in. How is it for you, Scott? Austin McMahon, what was the impact for you as a fan, and what is sort of your memories around all that?
Well, Dave, it was pretty. I mean, it's the feud that won the war. I don't think there's any doubt about it. At the time, as 1997 turned into 1998, WCW was winning the war. They did whiff at Starrcade because they should have had a better situation there for Hogan and Sting. But after the screw job, which really did happen, unlike our universe back in November, WWF was on the ropes, and the truth was that one good knockout punch, and it would have been the WCW network that we've been watching, but this character, Steve Austin, radiated with the audience, and the best guy coming out of the screw job, the best guy for him to feud with was Vince, because Vince did not want a guy like Austin to be the big, to be the top dog in the company. Well, guess what? Fast forward to March 29th, 1998 at the Fleet Center in Boston. Steve Austin beat Shawn Michaels to become the WWF champion, and everything changed. April 13th on Raw, the Monday Night streak ended for WCW. And by 1999, they were consistently beating them handily in the ratings. I think my favorite memories of that feud, Dave, obviously when the Winged Eagle was retired and the what they call the Globe Attitude Belt was introduced, which the belt, it would pretty much be the championship of the Attitude Era, because by Ruthless Aggression it would change to the other belt. I would say probably, what's sad is it's so memorable to me. I remember the dates. So I loved, it's the October 5th, I think, 1998 episode of Raw is when Vince was in the hospital, and
Yep.
we had the great bedpan shot, which literally still makes me shit my pants laughing every time I watch it. Because Vince's little grape-sized head donking off that was just, it's just so great.
That was a stiff shot. I love the enema, getting the cord for the enema and
yes.
Vince's facial reactions to that.
We always knew you were full of shit, Vince. Now we're gonna find out. Oh God, it's so amazing. So really, after that, it was he won the belt. He retained the title at SummerSlam. And I'm not going to go through the whole timeline, but that storyline, and I've always argued, next to Hogan Andre and the Mega Powers, as you mentioned, 89-90, the storyline arc between breakdown when Austin got screwed out of the title in that triple threat against Taker and Kane, all the way to WrestleMania 15 in Philly when he beat The Rock to win the title back. That story arc is arguably one of the greatest WrestleMania builds of all time. And during that time, that's when pretty much WWF overtook WCW. I don't believe they won a Monday night again. I don't think they won a Monday night again until again after that I'm brain farting.
Goldberg beating Hogan was the last time.
Yeah, Goldberg beating Hogan. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I brain farted. When Goldberg beat Hogan. When Goldberg beat Hogan in the at that night in Atlanta. So sorry, I don't know why. For some reason that didn't hit my head right. But after that, they were done. And by the middle of '99, they were consistently getting smoked weekly. So those were some of my favorite moments. And of course, the when the higher power was revealed, and Steve Austin took 50% of the company, thanks to Linda and Stephanie, because remember, Stephanie McMahon debuted as an on-air character during this feud. That was pretty great. The higher power itself was pretty lousy. The reveal that it was Vince was absolutely dreadful, because there was a lot of speculation, which we're going to talk about that speculation tonight, of the various guesses and possibilities that could have been that slot. But when it was revealed to be Vince, we all went, "Oh God, really? That's the best you can do?" And I feel like, fortunately, it got saved by Steve taking 50% of the company, and Steve having the power tie and the power finger, and the episode of Raw where they go to the Titan Towers and he dumps all the horse shit in Vince's office, and he says, that this is Vince McMahon's salary. Well, put it towards Mick Foley's health bills. Get well, you crazy son of a bitch. And then Shane's salary was the beer budget. Like that whole part there. Yeah. Those couple of episodes when he was CEO saved the higher power storyline from being a complete bomb. And then, of course, at the King of the Ring, Vince and Shane, with the help of Big Boss Man, won his half back. But then the next night on Raw, Steve beat Taker to win back his WWF title, because he lost it at, of course, the infamous Over the Edge pay-per-view, of course, the night that Owen Hart died. I love the Austin McMahon storyline. I mean, it was a great main event storyline that was supported by DX and the Nation, and you had the great mid-carders of Triple H and The Rock, and because Rock was mid-card pretty much. He didn't really become main event until the back end of '98. So overall, the Austin McMahon storyline is pretty much one of the greatest creative journeys ever taken, Dave, in the history of wrestling, and where it laid out in wrestling history. I mean, look, it won the Monday Night War.
Yep.
It won the Monday Night War. Austin McMahon beat the NWO in terms of eyeballs, because, well, let's put it this way: by '98, by '98, '99, the NWO was crap anyway. So those are my memories of the Austin McMahon feud and its impact. I mean, the impact is it won the Monday Night War. Yeah. So, and
it really was. I'm up there with you as one of the best storylines, if not the best storyline ever. And it's a real shame. One of the things that I think the biggest misstep the company have ever made since we've moved into our modern era has been that we've never really had a real decent DVD release of the Austin McMahon storyline. They brought out a VHS back in the day, which was sort of just a summary of the pre-match elements to each of the pay-per-view things. It was just a quick work through. It was a 1 hour video. It didn't last long. They brought that, re-released that on DVD with no additions, no nothing. They've done a couple of one-off episodes. I think there's an episode on the Monday Night Wars series about it. And again, It's more a bunch of talking heads. But
that's also, Dave, that VHS tape was very kayfabe.
Yes,
it was very kayfabe. Yeah.
But what I would love them to do with this is one of two things. Number one, do a real in-depth from beginning to end with a whole bunch of the matches from that feud as a one-off paper, as a one-off DVD, or do what they did with the 2 DX ones that they released in the mid, late 2000s, early 2010s, which was where they basically just did every segment, every week, and every match for whether it was 6 or 9 months, and that just all went onto a DVD. Why can't they do that with the Austin McMahon storyline? You could just have a DVD of every from the night after WrestleMania, where they do the whole belt changing thing in the easy way, hard way, which is one of the best promos. The suit, I love the suit promo. I love this is the last time you'll ever see me in this thing again. The picture and the ball shot and all that. It's just brilliant. All the way through to essentially the farewell, the na night where Vince gets booted. They should just do a DVD with every segment, every interview, every match from Austin McMahon from then to then. It would sell like hotcakes. It would be brilliant. That's one wish I had, because otherwise you just got to go and watch every single Raw. And I don't want to watch every single element of Raw these days, because there's a lot of Raw that doesn't hold up, but that does. That's just my beef. Bring it out on DVD. I'd buy it in an instant. Higher Power. I think, like you said, it was the Vince being revealed as the Higher Power was just such a letdown, and I think it was because of the way the storyline had been built and told to that date. It made no sense for Vince to be the Higher Power, because if we go back, the Higher Power storyline started late December 98, early January. I can't remember exactly, but when Undertaker returned with his darker character, from the moment he came back, he was talking up that he answers to a higher power. And I remember when it first started, I thought, he's talking about Paul Bearer. Paul Bearer's coming back. But Paul Bearer came back with him, and Paul Bearer was, we answer to a higher power. So you're like, okay, this is someone above Paul Bearer. This is something different. And then the storyline progressed to him starting to take shots at McMahon. And you had those great little spots in the story of the burning teddy bear and telling him that he's gonna take over the company. The whole higher power thing started out as Undertaker is going to take over the company. And we move post-Mania, and they start to ramp it up a little bit more. And they got, again, storytelling issues. The whole Shane McMahon storyline, they then go and bring the corporate ministry, which I never liked. But even then, you still had this idea that Undertaker was on an equal level with Shane, because there was a higher power that was going to come in, and that it was all about taking the company away from Vince. And it was working so well that Vince was becoming a babyface. Even though he had been feuding with Austin for 12 months, this storyline of the higher power started to paint Vince in a sympathetic light and was turning him babyface. And you had the whole elements of the kidnapping of Stephanie and Vince trying to save her and calling on Austin to help him out. And I remember the angle where the unholy marriage, and Austin comes out and saves the day, and Vince shakes his hand, and you could see it was ever so reluctant, and yet at the same time the grateful father in Vince it was genuine. I'm willing to put aside everything because you've just saved the daughter that I love the most, and I'm gonna honor that. I'm gonna recognize that. So this painted a picture where you're sitting there going, whoever this higher power is, he's going to be feuding with Vince. We're pretty well just turned Vince babyface. The higher power of Vince, this could be interesting. It's going to take Vince away from Austin, which probably needed to happen. That the storyline had played out.
Right.
It was ready to move on, and everyone was intrigued. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? And then the reveal is it was Vince all along. And it just landed like such a lead balloon. It was like a fart in church. It just hit the ground absolutely abysmally. And it really showed. It was the first element. When we talk about some of the guys that might have been it, and one guy that's been thrown out there as who Vince Russo said he wanted, and that Vince basically saw this person and went, no. They'd written this storyline with no end in sight. And it is so much like that Black Scorpion storyline where there was no who's going to play this person in the end. We'll work it out when we get there. And when we got there, the only person that Vince sort of felt could fit it was Vince himself, even though everything they'd done in the storyline was it couldn't be Vince because this person was gunning for Vince's company. And it just fell flat. It fell down so badly that it just left such a bad taste in everyone's mouth.
It did. One of my favorite, the weird kind of pseudo Vince face turn in that like 2.5 months between like when Austin beat Rock at WrestleMania 15 and won the belt back, and Vince had that look, and then pretty much from Vince was like, all right, well, he got me. I'm out. And Shane's like, you're a quitter. And he was focused on Taker and this taking over the company thing. And one of my favorite moments, and one of my favorite Vince moments, is at the end of Backlash 99 in Providence, when it was belt versus belt, when it was the Rock had taken the Smoking Skull belt because, Vince had it on his mantle, and he told Shane, just give this belt to Austin and just be done with it. He got me. I got to move on. I got to protect my I did have to say, Dave, I did kind of like the intricacies of that like 2.5 month stretch between WrestleMania 15 and when Vince was revealed, which was early June. So those 2 months from late March through early June. Vince, you kind of had this like sympathetic, listen, Austin won. He got me. All right. I threw everything in front of him, and in Philadelphia, he got me. So I got to worry about my company because Undertaker wants to take over everything, and he's stalking my house, and he's burning teddy bears, and he's putting crosses and shit in my house in Greenwich. Shane, just give this belt to Austin and just let's be done with it. Let him go do what he's got to do. He'll face other challengers and we move on. Shane would have nothing.
It really came across like, as much as I don't, and as much as I hate Austin, my company and my family, or in this case, my company and my daughter, well, I guess, it pushed Shane away by making this choice. But my company and my family are more important to me than my issues with Austin. And it had a logical foundation because you could sit there and say, he could still hate Austin for everything that's happened. And yet where we're going, the company and the family are more important to him. It made sense for what the arc was.
Yeah, it did. And then at Backlash 99, Vince and, Shane was pushing Rock, and it was belt versus belt and all that. And Austin won again. Vince this time came out as the babyface and decked Shane, and Rock won the match. Austin won the match, and Rock, obviously this led to Rock's, Rock's face turn as this year progressed. But in this case, Austin wins. Rock is gone as a heel. Vince hands him the belt, and while Vince is standing there staring at Austin, going, "All right, dude, you fucking got me. You got me." He had that look, like that look of not defeat, but the look of, I can't think of the word, but, all right, well, I got to move on. And then, of course, the great moment when
resignation. It's like
resignation. Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Resignation. That, you know what? You got me. There's your belt. You got everything. You're world champion. You got your smoking skull back. I got other shit. I got other fish to fry right now. To use the term that Austin used back in 1997. I got other fish to fry. Meanwhile, of course, we had the awesome Taker in the limo going, "Where to, Stephanie?" Ah! That was so great. The end of Backlash 99. So those couple of months were so good, and I kind of liked this pseudo Vince face thing going on, while Austin was kind of being used as a weapon against Taker. And then, of course, the experimental SmackDown that took place in my home building. I was not there, though. My old home building of the New Haven Coliseum, although I wasn't there. That was the that was when Stephanie was tied up, and then they were going to have the wedding and all that, and Austin saved Stephanie, and it was actually turning into a pretty good little storyline with Vince and Steve. Steve's like, "Look, I still fucking hate your guts, but I have nothing against your daughter."
Reluctantly working together.
Exactly. Like that hug when she's hugging Steve, and Steve doesn't know what to fucking do. And, Vince looks at Steve and goes, "Thank you." And Steve looks at him and goes, "I didn't do this for you, dickhead, but, she's an innocent pawn in this game." So that build through, over the edge. And, of course, the storyline part of that was totally forgotten, of course, sadly, with the death of Owen Hart. We kind of forget everything that happened at that show. But Taker won the belt because of the double refs and all that slop. And then 2 weeks later on that Raw, it is revealed that this higher power that Taker keeps talking about is just Vince. Shane had put together the corporate ministry, which I agree with you was kind of a weird little mishmash thing. Although I got to say, on a side note, Taker's theme in this stretch is one of his best.
Yes.
Taker's 99 theme, the down, bound, do, bound. I love that theme. I blast that in my car every once in a while. But then when the hood came off and Vince gave that face, you're like, "Oh, really?"
And it just diminished so much because number one, it didn't make sense from, like I said, where we'd just been these past couple of months. You even said it. Vince helped Austin keep the title.
Yeah,
he'd spent all this year trying to take it off him. And the storyline had built to the point where he helped Austin keep the title. And even the multiple storyline thing, he was trying to help Austin keep the title because he didn't want Undertaker to have it. So by revealing himself as the higher power, it just makes no sense as to if it was it was me, Austin, it was a work all along. I was doing it to fool you. It was just business. Well, hang on. If it was just business, why did you help him win the title at Backlash? Why did you help him keep the belt? That didn't make sense. It's a mishmash. The other thing it did is it absolutely cut the legs out from the Undertaker. They built the Undertaker up as this. I mean, he was bigger than anyone else. He was on equal footing with Shane because the higher power meant that, yes, it was the coming together of these two factions, but even Shane, he wasn't dominating the Undertaker in the corporate ministry. They were an alliance working side by side with a common goal. But when Vince gets revealed as the higher power, immediately the Undertaker is put back down into a lesser he's seen in a lesser light again. He's just seen as just another pawn, just another worker for Vince, doing what Vince wants. And I just felt it cut the legs off everything they had done for the Undertaker character for the past 6 months.
Yeah. Really bizarre. And then, we have the and then the King of the Ring happens, and then pretty much after Fully Loaded, when Steve wins that first blood match and Taker's off, and Vince gets taken off TV, then it ends. Then the storyline pretty much officially ends, and we don't have any real issues until, of course, eventually, Steve gets hurt, or Steve gets the surgery, and everything. So, but that reveal just really, let's put it this way: had they not done the second half of that segment on that episode, and Steve won got the 50%, I think we'd have been in for a rough 99 if that was like the best they could do.
Yeah. And I agree with you. That part of the segment saved it. But I watched that segment yesterday as part of my final preparation for this episode. And there are some massive holes in the storyline as it is, like the way they present on that, because they basically mashed 2 or 3 weeks of storytelling into one episode with the reveal. So you had the reveal of Vince, and Vince is gloating, "Oh, I fooled everyone," and all that. And then Stephanie and Linda come out, and Stephanie's upset. "How could you, Dad?" And that, you get that. Okay, she's just seen that, her dad's just played her. She would be hurt. She would be upset. But why is Linda there for one? But then Linda comes out with, less than 2 minutes after Vince has revealed himself as the higher power, Linda comes out with, "Well, I held an emergency meeting of the board this morning, and we own 50%, and we've named a new CEO." And all of a sudden you're like, hang on, if we've only just found out that Vince is the higher power and no one knew it, why would they have held an emergency meeting of the board? Why would Linda have given up her 50%, or Linda and Stephanie given up that power earlier in the day if they didn't know that Vince was the higher power?
Correct.
It made a hodgepodge of a thing that would have been better. Like, at least you could have done that. Well, maybe they did that if they'd done that element next week, the following week. Okay, you came out last week, you said this. Well, earlier today I held the emergency meeting of the board. It took me all week to get them together. Well, why didn't I know about it? Because you've been off with Undertaker and Shane and doing whatever. You could have delayed that by a week. But of course, you've then got the timing it would have hit on the King of the Ring build. But it was very clear that they rushed a few weeks worth of storytelling into one episode to make the most of the decision that they made, which was clearly a last minute decision.
Yeah, and it's funny. I never thought of that just now when you said, how did they make an emergency meeting this morning when I didn't reveal that I was the higher power till just now? So that, I never, Dave, that's actually funny. I never thought of that. But it's just kind of a mishmash, and I think it was just this is where like the Vince Russo style of storytelling comes into play, because we really don't think about logic. It's all about the moment. It's all about the moment. No one gives a shit about logic. This is wrestling. Logic should make no sense. We've been dealing with this for 50 years of wrestling. No one gives a shit about logic, so long as the moment's big. And that's exactly how Vince Russo thought. It's about the moment. It's not about the story per se, or the logic, I should say. It's not about the logic. It's about the moment. That's Vince Russo's thinking.
It is, and he carried that into WCW, and that's one of the reasons why WCW, in my opinion, why it fell apart and went to pieces, because the storylines had no conclusion. You throw all these things out and nothing ever got resolved, and people go, well, why am I watching this? There's nothing to invest in, because the storylines were just stopping suddenly. because it was about the moment. And at least in WWE now, Vince Russo had Vince McMahon over him to get some continuity. Can you imagine if this was Russo? We probably wouldn't have had the corporate angle added into it. We probably wouldn't have had Linda and Seth. We just would have had Vince as the high power, and then next week it'll be like nothing ever happened.
Right.
If it was just Russo.
Yep. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a great moment, but the reveal just really screwed the pooch. So. And
it was at the time. I remember at the time being on the internet. And look, the reality was, I talked before about how I was waiting to get my hands and see these things. That the reality was, we didn't get the episode of Raw for nearly a week after it aired in the US. So the spoilers were out there on the internet before I would ever got a chance to see the episode. And because had been building so big, and I knew it was coming, I was on the internet. Okay, I've got to find out. I can't wait. I've got to find out because it's going to be out there. And the rumors were out there about who, like, the Vince reveal was seen by everyone as a letdown at the time. And the rumors were out there in the week leading up to it. Who's it going to be? It could be this person. It could be that person. There were legitimate rumors. There were hopeful rumors. And there's been things come to light since then about who might have been the higher power.
Right.
But I think there is a general consensus that everyone who witnessed it at the time went, Vince should never have been revealed as the higher power. Vince should not have been in that role. Anyone other than Vince would have been better.
Correct.
But I guess that's where I'd like us to go in this episode. Would anyone other than Vince have been better?
Yes.
There are a bunch of we're gonna talk one by one. We're going to talk about some of the rumored people that were in it. And let's have a look. We're gonna look what might have worked, how it could have been done. Maybe if it was that person, would it have worked? Maybe why it might not have worked. And then I guess we can come to a conclusion at the end of this. Was maybe we go into the rest of this episode as we go through the looking glass. Was McMahon the best option for this storyline? Was he the best option in the end? I don't know. I think as we go through the looking glass and we look at who could have been the higher power, I think we have that question in the backbone there, in the back of our minds. Is was it the better option? So, you ready to go through the tunnel?
Dave, this is the highlight of my month because some days I wish I was in an alternate universe. So I wish I was a better higher power. So let's dive through the glass and head into the universe of pink skies, unicorns, and Matt Rotella hoping Mantar would become world champion. That's never happening, by the way, and we're never doing an episode about that. So, all right.
All right. So
we're
through
here.
The looking glass. Who were some options? Who were thrown out there? So I've gone through. I've listed some people who. These were rumors at the time. These were rumors back in 1999 of people who could have been revealed as the high power, either in the lead up to it. I think the rumor, like a Dave Meltzer rumor or an internet rumor that you get on the various news sites. I've heard that this person is going to be revealed as the higher power on Monday night, and they've signed, and they're going to be at Raw, and they're going to be there. It wouldn't have been cool if it was that person. So these are some of the names that were thrown out there. The first one that I want to start with, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. That was a name. I don't know if you remember him being thrown out, but that was a name that was certainly being thrown out there in the lead up to the reveal. Yes. I remember this one clearly. So what are your thoughts? Scott? Ted DiBiase, why would Ted DiBiase maybe have worked as the higher power?
Well, number one, he got back in the company, so maybe he wanted to, prove to Vince that, you never, I always was better than you. I was always had more money than you. It's kind of hard to explain, but being a benefactor would have been pretty great. The only thing that I feel logic wise is that why would Vince need a money guy? Vince is the money guy. So from a logic perspective, I actually don't think Ted DiBiase would have been a very good choice, because one thing Vince didn't need was money. It's not like there was a storyline where Vince was broke. So,
but Vince isn't in this world. Vince isn't revealed as the higher power, so it's the Undertaker and Shane who need the money.
That is true. Yes. If that's true, I didn't even think of that. I was thinking Vince was going to be a heel anyway, but good call. In this case, yes. I think that would have been a great choice then. Correct. Would it have had the big impact? Maybe. I'm trying to think of the audience. I suppose the audience would have been, would have thought it was cool, because obviously those guys were probably watching. Those guys were probably watching WCW as well, so they were DiBiase fans, even if they were younger and didn't watch in the 80s. But I think he would have been a good choice. I have a great choice. My favorite choice we're going to talk about in a couple of names. But I think DiBiase would have been a good choice because he was a benefactor. He was, remember, there's history there because DiBiase brought Taker in at Survivor Series 1990. So there's some history there. Yeah, I think he would have been a good choice. Not my favorite choice. My favorite choice is a couple of names from now. But I think Ted DiBiase would have been a pretty great choice. I'm not going to lie. I like that. Yeah. I like that option, Dave. You know what? I don't know why, but for some reason Vince was stuck in my head, so I apologize for left turning on that, because for some reason I had in my head that Vince was still part of it. But you're right. Yeah. DiBiase going against Vince, that would have been pretty cool. Vince staying a babyface, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to think about, Dave. Let me get this point out before I let you go. That's the thing we have to think about. What we have to think about is Vince is probably, obviously, if one of these other people are the higher power, Vince is staying a babyface. Because obviously you don't need Vince as a heel now, so it makes no sense. So we got to keep that in mind from a storyline perspective, that that Vince is still a babyface with Austin against the corporate ministry. That's the interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I think if we look at DiBiase here, I think there's a couple of reasons why it might have worked. Like you said, one thing is his character was the man with the money. He could buy anything. Every man has his price for $1 million man. And on top of that, like you just said, for the newer fans, they've just seen him as the man behind the NWO attempted takeover of WCW. So we've had this element of DiBiase tried to do it there, and in the end got booted out or chose to leave, and I mean that fizzled out with him. But he could have, he certainly was off TV in WCW by mid '99. So him coming back with a similar sort of thing. I want to buy out the WWE. I've got the money. I've got the influence. That works. He's got that link to the Undertaker. He brought the Undertaker in to the company originally, and that was where the rumors at the time. That was the foundation of that rumor, that it was DiBiase who brought the Undertaker in the beginning. So DiBiase has influence over the Undertaker. He already has that control, or that influence over him to be able to manipulate the Undertaker, who's beyond evil. Right. So that's sort of tied in, and I could picture it. DiBiase. I mean, if we look at how it might play out, DiBiase pulls off the hood. It's the $1 Million Man. Vince, I've told everyone, everyone's got their price, and I'm going to find your price. This is about taking over this company. This is about, running you out of business because I'm the wealthiest man. It's going to be about me. It certainly in the moment, I think would have made some logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the drawbacks of it play out as you move forward, because the drawback is that the $1 Million Man character in the WWF had played out. He'd come in, tried to buy the championship, didn't work, went through his various feuds. We had Money Inc. Then he brought in the corporation. But I remember commentary, Lawler would say things like, has DiBiase ever tried to buy the company? And it was always sort of laughed at, like that was never an option. It was never, DiBiase had never in the history of his character talked about buying the company. It was always about buying the belt or getting people to do what he wants. So the character, the history of the character doesn't fit there. And on top of that, DiBiase was done in the WWF. When Austin, when he finished up, he was an also-ran. Like, you didn't want to see him. He didn't really have influence. He wasn't a strong manager. And I think that had only finished in 96. It was only a couple of years earlier that he'd been managing Steve. Now, there's another pro. He'd been managing Austin when Austin lost the strap match and forced DiBiase to leave. So he's wanting revenge on Steve as well. You've got some logical tie-ins there that I'm coming for you. This is all about what you did to me.
Great point.
But I feel that the character of the $1 Million Man would not have resonated as someone who would have been bought long-term to be in a top-level position again. Because he moved from the top to the mid-card, and even when he was managing the end of the run, he was really managing lower mid-card guys. He wasn't managing guys at the top of the card. Right. So he was done, he was dusted, and I look at the reveal, I'm the man, and the first couple of weeks it's about getting my revenge on you, Austin. But when Austin wins the belt back, where do you go with it? What happens then? $1 Million Man hasn't bought the company, hasn't got the title anymore, and you're back to square one of, well, why has he got influence? Why would Taker stick with him then if the money isn't working?
Right.
I don't know that it would have been it had any long-term viability. In the moment, it would make sense. In the initial stage, you'd be like, oh, yeah, can get it. He wants to buy, he wants his revenge. You can picture the interviews, you cost me my career here, Steve, and I'm going to cost you your career. And the Undertaker's going to end your career, and he's going to cripple you permanently. And Vince, I'm going to buy this company and end you in the process. And survivability. And Shane's saying, Vince, you cut me off from my allowance a couple of years ago, and it was Ted DiBiase who started funding my allowance. He's the one who's been giving me the money to go and, have the big parties and all that. You can buy all that, but I think once you get past the Austin Undertaker match for the title, it's got nowhere to go. There's no other reason why Taker would stick with him after that. Why would Shane stick with DiBiase after that? Because you've just taken DiBiase back to where he was in 1996. An unsuccessful manager who we've seen consistently over time. He can't buy everyone. Not everyone does have a price for him because he kept losing. And that was the comeuppance was always the babyface prove that my integrity is more important than the money, and they end up winning, and they end up beating, and so I don't think there's long-term viability for DiBiase in the role. Initially, it'll get those first few weeks. It'd certainly work better than the Vince reveal. But longer term, I think all it would do is reduce him. It would reduce Taker's influence, and it'd probably have a bigger impact on Shane. Shane would just be seen as second fiddle to DiBiase, who's now third or fourth rung on the chain, it probably would have had a bigger hit on the way they were presenting Shane as a character.
Right. Yeah, that's what I think. I feel like there was a no-win situation there if a guy like DiBiase was. I feel like the reveal needed to be earlier in the year, and that might be a problem. That might be something we think about throughout all of these choices. That that he's got to be. That maybe if this was late 98 and into 99, and maybe the reveal comes the night after WrestleMania instead of all the way into June, and then you cost Austin the title during Over the Edge and do it that way instead of waiting till after that.
That would work really well. I mean, I could picture that because DiBiase comes out the night after WrestleMania. He's revealed as the higher power. The higher power is here. I'm coming for you. I'm coming to buy the company, Vince. And you've got the whole. And I'm unleashing. I bought the Book of Evil. I have unleashed. I've tapped into, helped the Undertaker tap into his darker side because I've been paying for him to study under the dark arts and the most evil people in the world. I've been buying the books. So there you've got the build of, well, the Undertaker's continuing to become more evil, which he was doing. That you can do the whole Stephanie thing again, financed by DiBiase. They get the belt and DiBiase's there. I did it. I've got the title. I got my revenge on you, Austin, and now Vince, I'm coming for you. I've bought Shane out because then it makes more sense later on for the corporation to come under the link with the alliance, with the ministry then, because DiBiase can buy Shane out. I've paid Shane off. He's joined me and he's aligned with me now. And now we're coming for you. I've got Shane's trust funds, my money. We're going to buy you out, and I'm going to run the company. It makes sense if it starts earlier, and it builds better, and he gets that near control, and then you have the match where maybe Austin wins the title back. You play it on the double line. If Austin loses, McMahon willingly says, if Austin loses that match, I will sell you my share in the company. And so you've got the extra thing on the thing. And then when Austin wins, McMahon keeps his company and Austin has prevailed. And you've had 2-3 months of the higher power, and then it can peter out a little bit more, and it probably sits a bit better.
I think so. I think if you do it the night after Mania, you start the higher power build at the beginning of the calendar year into 1999 during the Rumble and such, and then have the higher power revealed the day after WrestleMania. You're building, and then you have Austin, and then you build to perhaps. I mean, I hate it may change things because this storyline could stretch, and it may you may have issues and with maybe what many consider the rushed push of Triple H at the end of the summer. And you may hold off on him winning his first world title. There's a lot of different scenarios that may ripple if the higher power storyline had more legs going into the summertime.
What if the higher power, because the Undertaker had lost that match and lost the title, DiBiase rips on the Undertaker. I invested all this to make you the most evil person in the world. I gave you everything and you couldn't cut it, and I am done with you. Get away. You're no longer, I don't want you. You're out of here. Triple H is the next, because Triple H was the blue blood. I mean, I know they altered the character, but to be fair, in 99 they hadn't completely distanced him from the heritage of the character, the Hunter Hearst Helmsley character. So you could do I'm investing in him. He's the future. I'm gonna use him to climb to the top now. I'm gonna invest all my money in him, and he is gonna be the one who rises. And then as Triple H courts Stephanie and the whole back end of the year, DiBiase's this influence over, or now we've got Stephanie. There's options there. You could create some options there to keep it running until eventually you've got to write him out. Eventually, Hunter could be, no, I've married Stephanie, and you're moving to the McMahon Helmsley regime. You're out of here. This is not about you, DiBiase. This is about me. It's my time. I'm it. You're gone. Kick him out, and he's off TV permanently.
It's my time. Look at that. Look at that. You even pimped the great theme song there, Dave. It's my time. I love that theme in 2000. I actually like that theme better than I liked the theme that he has now. Yeah, I really think so. Yeah, I like that. DiBiase is just about power now. I don't need money anymore. If I could buy you, Vince, buy you and sell you like I know I can, I win. And if I'm buying and selling everybody else, I'm taking you out. And there you go. So, yeah, pretty huge. So,
but it would have had, but like you said, it would have had to have been revealed earlier, because I think once you've already run the Stephanie angle, once you've already run Taker's already the champion, it doesn't have the same power anymore, because it feels like he's jumping on the bandwagon as opposed to having manipulated the events that have resulted in they gave this idea that the higher power was influencing things, but everything that had happened in storyline had been Undertaker and Shane, as opposed to the higher power manipulating the events. And by bringing him in after it's all happened, it just seems also random. And as I said, once you take the title off Undertaker, it kills that influence. Whereas if you show him influencing earlier, it might allow it to a bit more sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may lead into 2000, and 2000 may end up being a completely different situation, because, if Austin's hurt and he's out and Rock becomes the face, I like the DiBiase scenario, Dave. However, there's one I still like better. But let's keep going.
We'll get there. All right.
Yeah, let's keep going.
The second rumor that ran around at the time was very similar to the DiBiase one, and it was the thought or the idea that the higher power was Brother Love. I love you. Can you imagine it? Bruce Pritchard coming out in the red face and the white suit and all that. But again, the premise of the rumor, and this rumor this was more that follow up to the DiBiase rumor. You heard the DiBiase ones, and then it was like, well, if it could be DiBiase, why couldn't it be Brother Love? Because Brother Love was his first manager. He was the manager, and he allowed Paul Bearer to take over managing. It's not that they had a falling out. It's not that the Undertaker kicked Brother Love away. It was that Brother Love introduced Paul Bearer as the new manager to take over. So you never had that end of relationship. So it would be reasonable to think that Brother Love could have influence over the Undertaker because he managed him earlier on. On top of that, the preacher gimmick would fit the Ministry of Darkness gimmick. Brother Love could come out in all black now instead of all white, or just the visual comparison of everyone in black, but here's the higher power in all white in his white suit. He would have had to have toned down the "I love you" stuff, and it's no longer the Ministry of Love, but this is all about the Ministry of Evil. And I've been away all these years studying evil and studying it all, and I've unleashed this new level of evilness in the Undertaker. Evilness is not a what sort of word is that?
I know, yeah.
But right. I think that, again, the premise of it would carry some initial. I think it could hold up to logic, that it would work. And underlying that, because 99, we are in the world of the growing knowledge of the backstage process of everything. We know most of the deeper fans, most of the fans who are on the internet know that Bruce Pritchard did work behind the scenes for the company, was involved behind the scenes. So it would be reasonable. It wouldn't be too far of a step to think he's had enough of working for McMahon and he wants to take over the company. It would be reasonable to accept that. And you could weave it into the storyline. You know, you work for me. No. I used to work for you, but now we're going to take control. I want to run the company. I think there's some validity to how it would, again, build up. But I think the negatives are that Brother Love was never seen as anything more than a comedy character. And it would take a hell of a rehab to introduce him, even bringing him out in 99. People would immediately think of, I love you, red face. He's just a comedy character. He never had any influence or any power, really. And he's not seen in that upper card sort of the guy who can be influencing everyone. I think the Brother Love character was, just would not be accepted in the role.
No, I don't think so. I'll be honest. I think I think it'd be too much of a comedy thing because that was always his gimmick. So I don't think he would be taken seriously. And I think it's too big a storyline to have a comic, particularly also, Dave, the Brother Love was not an Attitude Era character. No. He would have been laughed at. If he was part of something, if this was a storyline, say in, 94, 95, maybe. But by 99, a character like Brother Love would be a joke in WWF.
I think it would have had there would have been a bigger letdown if that was the reveal than the feeling that Vince had. As I said, it's possible that you can create this like the storyline could be, like I said, Brother Love has been away for years. He's learned the dark arts. He's unleashed it all. But that's stuff that you've got to explain after the reveal. And the reveal itself would be the letdown. And no one would care after that. Like with Vince, no one cared after the reveal. We just and that's why they moved on with the whole corporate buyout, the Austin being the CEO storyline, because they realized once that reveal is done, we've got nowhere to go. The higher power thing just sort of needs to be killed off because we can't carry it on. I think the same thing would happen if it was Brother Love. Brother Love gets revealed. Everyone just goes, what? You're joking. That doesn't work. We're not willing to accept it. And I don't think any amount of promos that say, I've been studying the black arts, I've unleashed this, I brought him here in the first place, I've always been working behind the scenes for The Undertaker. No one would have been willing to listen to it because everyone would have just gone, why would you have that as your reveal? It doesn't work.
Exactly. I just don't think it would have been taken seriously as a character for the Attitude Era. I just don't. But this next one, this is my number one choice, Dave, but set me up so I can hit it in the gap. Go ahead.
So another rumor that started to play around at the time, and this one was probably gaining about as much track as the Ted DiBiase rumor, and that was probably the biggest one that was being floated around, is the return of Jake the Snake Roberts as the higher power.
Yep.
Jake the Snake, the man who had an up and down career in the WWE in terms of his character in recent years. Last seen in '96 as the Preacher, as the Preacher Man trying to make the comeback. But before that, the epitome of evil, the absolute epitome of evil back in 92 when he, and 91 and 92 when he and The Undertaker worked together to cause living hell for the Macho Man Randy Savage. What are your thoughts on Jake the Snake Roberts there, Scott?
Jake the Snake is my number one choice. For a couple of reasons. Number one, Jake would have been a legit guy that would have gotten respect from the crowd, from the audience. And number two, instead of going with the money factor, you go with the sinister evil factor. And Jake and Taker did work once well together in 1991 against Savage, as you know. And Jake could go up against Vince and say, you cut me loose. You promised me so much in my career and you never delivered, like you never deliver with anybody. You throw out promises and then don't deliver them. And then to Austin, he'd be like, listen, I remember the 1996 King of the Ring. I could have been king, and you stopped me. So there were so many angles you could have taken with Jake being the higher power. And and I think the sinister side of it more than even the money side of it. I would have been, Shane could have been doing the bankrolling instead of Vince, and we would have had killer promos. Oh my God, would we have had killer promos? The storytelling, like, listen, Jake's got a clear head. He channels his inner 88, 89, 90, 91. That whole stretch from when he was a babyface feuding with DiBiase, wallowing in the muck of avarice, to being the heel in 91, 92 with Savage. And that would have been epic. And you reveal him the night after Mania. And even this, Dave, sure, Taker could be a champion. But unlike the other options, Jake could actually still wrestle. So maybe, just maybe, Jake Roberts becomes the WWF champion. No disrespect to Taker, but yeah.
Well, even if he's revealed on the night that he was revealed, I think it works. Definitely works better than who we've talked about so far, and Vince in that, there's credibility there. Jake can reveal it off, and even his facial look and just the way he would hold himself in the ring, you would know immediately we've got heel Jake. We've got heel Jake with those eyes, that look that he gave. Those looks that he would give during the Macho Man interviews, where he's got, he's holding his eyes quite narrow and he's just got that real cold look on his face. He can portray it from right at the beginning. Like if the reveal comes, people will be like, oh my goodness, it's Jake the Snake. And oh my goodness, we've got heel Jake the Snake. Like they would know it the moment he took the hood off.
Right.
Jake the Snake, like you said, purporting the evil elements. We're back there. He's the master manipulator. I've always been the master manipulator. I've always been the snake in the grass, manipulating things from underneath. You haven't seen me from Austin. You beat me a couple of years ago. You beat me down. I had broken ribs. I was already nearly in the hospital, but I came out. And yes, you beat me that night, but you wouldn't have beaten me if I was 100%. And look where your career's gone. Right. You cost me my shot at the title, and I've come back. I'm here now. Undertaker was already champion. We cost you your championship, and I'm going to make sure you never hold it again. And Vince, you cost me money. You withheld checks. You could make up stuff about how Vince has shortchanged him or whatever. And now I'm going to take what you hold dear. I'm going to take that company from you. And you can picture Jake doing it with that quiet voice.
Yep.
And I'm going to take it from you, Vince. Everything that you hold dear, and everything that you hold dear. He took Stephanie. He took, I would take your wife if she wasn't, old and decrepit or something like that. Yeah, you could throw in a couple of elements, where
tag.
but you could just, but Jake could get away with it. I took your daughter and I took her because it amused me. And Austin, you prevented the sacrifice of her to me. Right? You're tying the elements of the storyline that you've done. Jake would just cut a killer. And then the Undertaker could be turning around and going, this is the man who taught me evil from the start. This is the man who showed me what real darkness was about. And you fans blinded me to that. Mm-hmm. Right? You fans turned my attention from what the true calling was. But Jake helped me this man helped me out. Undertaker should never refer to him as Jake or Mr. The higher power.
Right.
Revealed it to me again. When I was off injured last year, he called me and he reminded me of the darkness. And that is why I returned. And that is why I've done everything that I've done till now, because we've been working together this whole time. And I manipulated Shane. Shane's, and it can tie in that it's not just Shane. Shane's whole turning on Vince was because Jake manipulated him. And, Jake can talk about, I've known Shane since he was younger. We were out partying when you were home working. When you thought Shane was studying at college, he was partying with me. You can add little elements that people will sit there and go, well, we know Jake partied. That'd work. So I think there's a lot of a cool factor. And like you said, down the line, he can wrestle. Austin wins the title back from Undertaker. Well, you might have got it back from him, but I'm coming for you now. And I'm not hurt anymore. I'm not injured anymore. I think, to me, the two drawbacks for it to be Jake, number one, he would needed to have gotten to be in ring with Austin and to utilize him in ring. He would have needed to have gotten in some better shape, because the last time we saw Jake, he had pot belly and was clearly overweight, and that would need to be something that he would have had to have rectified to make it work for him to get back in the ring. But he doesn't need to get back in the ring. He could manipulate things. And it gives credibility to the use of the acolytes and the use of all these other guys, the manipulation factor. It's almost reminiscent of Kevin Sullivan in Florida, in his gimmick in Florida. I've never seen any of it, but what I've read about it, sort of the influence, the mind games, the occultish sort of feel to it. You could not go as dark as the occult sort of thing, but it's certainly, you're almost playing that same sort of image and character out. Kevin Sullivan. And there's a name I didn't even think of from my list, Kevin Sullivan. I don't think it'll work in WWF. We'll talk about him. Maybe I'll throw that up later. I just thought of that. But Jake brings that element. But the other issue I have with Jake is, can he stay sober? And there's the issue, because if the whole storyline is completely dependent on Jake staying on top of his demons, which unfortunately this time he didn't. And the issue is, if he has a bad week and he turns up not in the state to work, the whole storyline goes to hell in an instant. So his reliability, both in ring and behind and behind the scenes, his reliability at this time is probably the biggest drawback that you're facing. And again, maybe just the whole, fans will hate him and can hate him, but fans love Jake. even if he tried to go full evil, would the fans accept it? Or would we go back to what happened when he first came in? He got turned face because everyone loved him in the DDT, even though he was doing everything under the sun to be as heelish as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Would the fan, is he, because he's so good at what he does, would it backfire on them and everyone start cheering him?
If he was going against Austin, no. I think Steve's popularity was so strong that that I think he still would have been booed. And I think if he had guys around him that nobody else liked, like Triple H, because I would still have turned Triple H heel at WrestleMania 15. Taker was a pretty good heel. You would have had your share of heels that the fans definitely would have booed, but I don't think that Austin would have been overtaken by Jake if you had the storyline go in that direction.
But the longer term storyline isn't Jake versus Austin. It's Jake versus McMahon. And that's where I wonder about whether or not you can keep Jake heelish, because it's about buying the company. It's about the higher power trying to take over WWF and take it away from Vince, because that's been the higher power storyline. The Austin element, I think, adds depth to it and adds credibility to the current situation when he appears. But the storyline they've been building since Undertaker returned and hinted at it is it's about taking control of the company. So Jake is going to be more playing off with McMahon than he is playing off with Stone Cold.
Good call. True. Now, when you get to that point, though, if you get to that point, would the gimmick have run its course? I guess that's the question, because you have to have Austin in it, at least in the beginning, because he is the top babyface. And if this is the big storyline, you can't not have him creatively involved in some capacity. So at that point, the question is, how far do we go in before he is the babyface? Or he gets taken out by another heel? Does Triple H... Does it ultimately come down to Triple H is the guy that's going to eventually turn on all these guys and take the power for himself? And he's so hated at that point in 99 that may work. I think that's what we have to think about, because if Jake starts getting cheered, then maybe that's the time that you really push, Triple H as the number one heel, and as the number one heel, and Jake gets booted. So I think that's a timeline thing, Dave. I think eventually that would have had to happen. It's just a question of where in the timeline he eventually has to, you turn him face, or Triple H just takes over the ministry and Jake just leaves.
Sort of just fizzles out and just disappears into the netherworld again.
Right, exactly. That's the question ultimately. Is Jake that big a heel that he that it can last for a decent amount of time, to where you can carry it for a while, and I'm trying to think, you could carry it for a while and let it hold up until you feel the crowd turning. That's what it comes down to. You have to really. This is a storyline, Dave. If you're using Jake, where you really have to pay attention to when the crowd starts to to turn.
Absolutely. But I mean, yeah. If we bring it back to the crowd, therein lies, I think, the one other issue that putting Jake in the role you've got to overcome, and that is the fan base. The last time they saw Jake, he was getting beaten by Austin and getting beaten pretty soundly by Austin.
Right.
Austin beat him from pillar to post. And whether it's, it doesn't matter. The storyline was about Austin doing it comfortably. He's already cut the promo on him. And is it seen as the danger you've got, as much as those of us that have been fans forever sit there and go, evil heel Jake would just work in this gimmick? But then the question you've got to ask is, does the fan base in 1999, do they remember Jake the Snake from 1991? Or do they remember Jake the Snake from 1996? And if all they remember is Jake the Snake from 1996, all they're going to see is an old guy who Austin has already beaten. And Austin has already humiliated. And while it's all great, I want my revenge on you, all you're looking at it, all that a fan might be looking at it is, well, you might want your revenge, but we already know Stone Cold can beat you. And Stone Cold cut that great promo on you. And that's why we love Stone Cold. And that's why Austin's the best. And who cares about you, Jake? Like, that to me is the other potential danger, is that fan reaction. Because the fan reaction could very well be we just don't buy it because Austin's already dominated him. And it doesn't cut it.
Yeah, I think that's how this plays out. So when it comes to Jake as the higher power, it's all about the crowd. I think we ultimately have to keep that in the back of our minds. It's all about the crowd, because if the audience starts to turn and Jake starts getting some cheers because it's Jake, then maybe you pull the trigger on somebody. You almost like Damian Priest and Finn Balor kicking out Edge out of Judgment Day
after 4 weeks. Yeah,
after 4 weeks. Except this is more like 9 or 10 months. So that would be very interesting. But of our three choices so far, I love DiBiase and I love Jake for different motivations. DiBiase, it's money and power. Jake, it's evil and power and turning Jake mad with determination. And you could get some really killer promos. So
you would.
Yeah.
You would.
I love the Jake. I love the Jake thinking. That's my favorite so far, Dave.
Yeah. All right. Well, talking about killer promos, the next name we're going to throw out there is someone who would deliver killer promos in this role, if it was put in this role. So another rumor that was out again at the time, it was one that it didn't have. It was one of those ones that was more the counter argument. I don't know it was so much of a rumor as a wish list. The whole, DiBiase is going to be it because of this reason and that reason, and then counter that with it. Well, why wouldn't it be this person then for the exact same reasons? And that person is the man who at the time was the owner and promoter of ECW wrestling, one Mr. Paul Heyman. Now, Paul Heyman's name was again, to me, this was not so much of the rumor that it would happen, but maybe the desire that it might happen from fans who were like, I don't want to see DiBiase, or I don't want to see Jake. I want to see something new. The benefits of Paul, the arguments for Paul Heyman was Paul Heyman managed The Undertaker in
Mhm.
WCW. Before he was The Undertaker, when he was Mark Callis,
Correct.
Paul Heyman managed him back then in 1990, 1991.
Mhm.
So he's got that foundational element. He's got a history with him. So for the long-term wrestling fans, there's a logical element to it that it would be accepted he would have influence. Another element that to throw in there is Paul Heyman is the mad promoter, the mad scientist of ECW. He's the owner of another company who has spent the last 3 years building the fan base of his company on the premise of, we hate WCW, we hate WWF, they've tried to run us out of business, but we're still here.
Right.
So the concept of Paul Heyman wants to put Vince out of business and wants to buy out the company would have credibility. It would be accepted. Further to that, Paul Heyman is not a face that the WWF fans have ever seen on television, yet would be accepted, I believe. He is well known enough in the industry that although he never appeared on WWF television ever, I think the fan base would go, we know who he is and we can buy it. So I think those elements in themselves give credence to it might work. And as I said, you want to talk about a killer promo? You're talking about a man who still cuts them today. He's been the best promo in the company for the last 10 years, probably the last 20. And, you know, he was able to cut them back then. It would do it. The biggest drawback for me, there are two drawbacks I see, that they're tied together. Number one, he's the owner and promoter of another company, and that's who he's associated with. So if Paul Heyman gets the reveal, all I'm picturing fans doing is chanting ECW and people wanting to see ECW wrestlers come in. And number two, can Paul Heyman be, he's got commitments elsewhere. He can't be there every week. He's got his own company to run, his own promotion to run. Are we going to see everyone just wanting to see, well, let's bring in ECW guys then. That's what we expect now. Let's replace the Acolytes with Rob Van Dam and Sabu and Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman and whoever. I think the ECW association for Heyman would kill it before it ever got a chance to get off the ground. What do you think? Paul Heyman as the higher power?
I think from a logic perspective of why would be amazing. And once again, you would have great promos. Obviously, if we're going really backgrounds and such of the universe, Vince would have obviously have had to work something out with Paul behind the scenes between WWE and ECW. Now, on top of that, you could have had some of the WWF guys show up on ECW TV, because this would have been huge for ECW, because if this was going on while ECW was still in business, it was right around this time that ECW got that Friday night TNN deal. And that would have added a ton to the weight of why Paul is doing what he's doing, because you could work like a crossing of promotions. So this opens a whole new avenue, Dave, if this is true, because unless you're saying that ECW closed up 2 years early, which wouldn't surprise me. But if ECW is still a thing, then you could really incorporate some pretty amazing stuff into the storyline. You could have corporate ministry guys showing up on ECW TV, and you could have like Austin versus whoever the champion was at the time, Taz, or or Mike Awesome, or I don't know, fucking whoever, Shane. Well, no, was Shane Douglas in ECW in '99?
99. It was mid '99 that he returned to WCW.
Yeah, because 2000's the Revolution group.
Yeah.
So okay, maybe this motivates Shane Douglas to stay, and Shane Douglas becomes the face of the corporate ministry in that aspect, and maybe Taker and Shane Douglas work together. I mean, we're really pulling it now. You did bring up this guy, Dave. So I mean, there's a lot of avenues.
The one who comes back to ECW like about 4 weeks after or 6 weeks after the higher power reveal, the man who returns to the ECW from WCW is Raven. And of course, we all know what Raven's promos have been like, and Raven's character was always on the dark edge as well. So imagine Heyman bringing Raven, the real Raven, into WWE as part of the ministry, like the newest member of the ministry under the Undertaker. I mean, yeah, you want to bring in someone who could really bring it in ring and maybe promo and character wise fit what that gimmick was. Raven would certainly be one.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it opens up, this option, Dave, opens up so many avenues because, I think one thing we have to pump the brakes on though is we have to remember that Taker was the top guy of this group in terms of in-ring. So we only need to do so many crossovers. I said to myself just now, as I said that, man, he's going to bring in Shane Douglas, and Shane Douglas is going to get more clout than Taker. No, that's not happening. But Taker showing up on ECW TV would actually be pretty wild.
But this is the drawback. This is what I was referring to. I think having Heyman in the role runs the risk of it becoming an ECW invasion storyline rather than the corporate ministry. It's going to undermine Taker. It's going to. I mean, I talked before about maybe Taker. Vince McMahon thing sort of devalued Taker. I think this would devalue Taker as well.
Yeah, I think the only way, Dave, that this probably works is if ECW was already under, or he sold it, which at that time was not happening. So clearly, what it comes down to is, ECW would have to have been out of business already if this situation was going to happen. ECW would have had to have already gone under. I agree with you. I think we were going a little too overboard on the. Now that I'm thinking about it, now it would have still been cool, yes, but now
in the moment, it would have been awesome, and the first week or two of promos would have been killers.
Yeah.
But the longer term issues, I think, would have been the drawback there.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with you that it's no longer turning into Heyman working with Taker to take over WWE. It's turning into Paul taking over, invading WWE via ECW. So the only way that this would work is if ECW was already out of business. And even though they were not doing great in 1999, they were still on TV and they were still doing viable things. So unfortunately, this option only would be good if ECW was gone and Paul was actually an employee of WWE.
Yeah. Well,
now if that was the case,
he was an employee of WWE. If everything we've heard and read over the last 20 odd years is taken and accepted, he was an employee of WWE from about 1996.
That is true.
Yes. Vince was helping him out, but I agree with you. The company would have need to have been out of business, because otherwise it just looks like, or all anyone's going to want to see is ECW versus WWE matches. They're not going to care anymore about the Undertaker.
Right, exactly. And Austin, it would have been about Austin versus Austin versus whoever, Tanaka, Mike Awesome, like all that kind of shit. Like it would have been too. The audience would have devalued the storyline and the story. So that would have been difficult. Admittedly, that would have been difficult. However, again, short term, Dave, that's a pretty great idea, because I think you would get great promos, you would get great narrative, but long term, I think the focus would vanish and it would just be an ECW WWE thing.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, we've moved through 4 rumored people. There's one more person that has been out there in the rumor mill, and this one's a very interesting one. And there's some legitimate credibility to this one, but at the same time, I've read some other stuff that maybe suggests it's not the case. So the last person in this part I want to talk about, before we maybe just throw it open for anyone else it could have been, is a young man at the time by the name of Christopher Daniels, the Fallen Angel. Very, very good worker, very popular on at the time, was an indie worker. Nowadays we look back, we've seen a guy who circled the world and wrestled just about everywhere except WWE. Although he did do a couple of TV matches, but as an enhancement talent, he never made it in WWE. But he's certainly well known around the world. Circled, most wrestling fans know who this guy is, and know that he can work. So the background of this one is that allegedly, and I'll take it beyond allegedly, because allegedly Vince Russo had actually wanted Christopher Daniels to be the higher power when it was revealed. And that comes from, I say allegedly, because that actually comes from interviews that Vince Russo has done. Vince Russo has actually put it out there that he wanted Christopher Daniels as the higher power. He had a high on him. He was an indie talent, really high on him, had a good name, good reputation, and believed that bringing him in, he's a nobody. So you can do whatever you want with him. He has got there's no sort of prehistory that anyone's got to move past. He's a nobody that can be created as a new character in any way you want. That's the foundation of it, and the story. And I've heard interviews with Bruce Pritchard. I've read stuff that Vince Russo's put out there. Bruce Pritchard's even sort of semi-confirmed that this was who Russo wanted in the role. Now the story goes, according to Russo and according to Bruce Pritchard, is that they brought Christopher Daniels in for television, and Vince took one look at him and said, "Who's that? He's so small." And they said, "That's Christopher Daniels." And Vince said, "No, he's not the higher power. We've got to do something else." Hence why Vince himself gets put in the role. That's the story that Vince Russo and Bruce Pritchard have both put out on their podcasts. But the counter to that, when I was preparing for this, is I actually read an interview that Christopher Daniels did, where they put the interviewer put that to him, said, "Oh, allegedly you were going to be the high power," and Christopher Daniels went, "No one ever put that to me. I was never offered that role. I was never asked to do that role. It was never put out there as a storyline to me. I wasn't even in talks with the WWE at the time." So I don't know if this is a Vince Russo truth, which means there's no truth to it at all, or if this is if there is elements where maybe they were talking about it internally and invited Christopher Daniels in for maybe a tryout. Vince saw him and went, "We can't go there," and then they couldn't come up with anyone else. Christopher Daniels as the potential higher power. What are your thoughts, Scott?
I got to be honest. I honestly don't think this would have worked. I don't think anybody really knows who he is. So I don't know if the audience would have reacted to a guy they'd never seen before. So I don't know if it would have worked. That one I actually have to agree with Vince if that's a true story. I don't know why they thought a young unknown would have been a great choice. I don't know where they get that from, but I wouldn't have gone with it. I mean, Christopher Daniels over time, when the Fallen Angel and all that kind of stuff, I think would have been fantastic. But if they did a storyline like this, say in 2008, 2009, when he was a little more established, I probably would have agreed with it. But 1999, I don't know. I don't think he had the gravitas for the audience to have related to or jumped on for such a big gimmick.
I think that's the key. You've just nailed it there. It's the way the audience would have perceived it, because I think even in those early stages of his career, again, I haven't seen much of him. We don't get. We've got very little TNA over here. We've got very little. I've had very little chance to see a lot of his work, but from everything I have seen and what I've read and what I know of him as a worker and an interviewer, Christopher Daniels had the talent to pull it off. I believe he had the talent to make that sort of character work. But it's not a character that you could have done. You couldn't have put Christopher Daniels in as the reveal on the night, because, like you said, he doesn't have the crowd nuance. The crowd would have looked at him. The audience would have looked at him and just gone, "Who is that? I don't get it. Who is this? Why do we care?" If you had done, now this is how I believe it could have worked. If you want to paint a story that, okay, we're going to give it, Christopher Daniels is going to be it, then you've got to paint the story again. We've got to start painting the story earlier, but it's got to be done in backstage and pre-recorded vignettes. You would have almost, I picture it almost Vader Emperor-like, where we see The Undertaker doing some stuff and he turns up at maybe like a dark temple or something, and he approaches this shadowy figure in the hood who is Christopher Daniels, and so it's his voice. This is what I've done. This is what I've done. Well done, Undertaker. Now we need to take the next step. And you slowly are establishing that this person is there along the way. Maybe even sort of seeing his face under the shroud. Emperor-like, now I want you, now put into action the plan regarding Stephanie. We worked this out. Go and do it. And so you create this element where for a few months you have seen the Undertaker approaching him. You've heard his voice. You've seen that he's not very tall. And this concept that he's so small is the reason why Vince McMahon didn't want him. I buy it a little bit because Vince likes his big guys. But at the same time, this idea of a smaller guy manipulating the Undertaker's mind or being the mastermind behind it, it could have worked because it just, it creates the thing. So long as the Undertaker was always seen as the protector and the one who was doing the muscle work. Mm-hmm. So Christopher Daniels, I think, had the talent. You would have had to have done all these vignettes over time, backstage stuff. You couldn't have just revealed him on the day, so that finally, when he's coming out in person, we've got this. Well, we actually know this is the higher power. We've seen him for the last few months. We haven't seen him wrestle. We haven't maybe seen his full face, but we know he's short. We know he's got this voice. We know we maybe even have seen his face under the hood. So, yeah, we could accept it now. That's the only way it would work. And then it becomes this manipulation thing over time. And maybe eventually he gets in the ring. Who knows? But the drawback of all that is, once again, it paints the Undertaker as subservient, as only doing what someone else wants him to do, as basically a hired gun. And that's not what the character of the Undertaker was. The Undertaker was the evil mastermind.
Right.
And so all it would have done was basically emasculate Undertaker and minimize his threat and his credibility. And it may have unfortunately brought an early end to the the good thing is Mark Calloway is always able to reinvent himself, and he went away and came back as the biker. If this had happened, he probably would have had to go away earlier, and I guess the biker thing allows him to be reinvented. But yeah, I just don't think I don't think it works in the longer scheme of things. I really don't think it works because the Undertaker is the man who should have been doing the manipulating. So yeah, Christopher Daniels has talent, could pull it off, and can definitely wrestle, but you can't reveal him on the night. He needed to have been in the storyline almost from the beginning to make it work.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what cracks me up is the problem is Taker. We're giving Taker, because I mean this is the Undertaker, and this is where the storyline, regardless of who you put in that slot, is very delicate. Because if you're going to have somebody that he's got to answer to, or he's going to be answering to, it's got to be somebody with some gravitas. That's why I think of all of the names we've come up with, I really think that DiBiase and Jake would have been the two best choices, because those are guys that would have been somebody he answered with respect.
Yeah.
Regardless of who Christopher Daniels is, it's that Taker would not have answered to some young little guy. Like, that would have made no sense, unfortunately.
No.
And unfortunately, as we said, Taker turns into just some enforcing assassin. And I think that would have been a problem.
I think therein lies the issue with the storyline from the beginning, is Taker coming in as there is a higher power coming. I answer to the higher power. Everyone immediately went, I mean, I remember at the time thinking, hang on, the Undertaker's the top of the food chain. The Undertaker is the evil manipulator, the mastermind, the man who's always been the dominant person. Why on earth would the Undertaker answer to anyone? And if he does answer to someone, that person has got to be outstandingly influential, manipulative, whatever. And I think even when you talk about DiBiase and Jake, I just don't think they fit what was in my mind of how it could possibly be that the Undertaker is subservient to anyone, because his character for his entire career was never subservient. I don't think either of them would end up being able to fit that mold, because they had been presented and been around long enough that you've seen their weaknesses and their flaws. Why would the Undertaker be subservient to someone who had these weaknesses and flaws?
Yeah.
So the issue is the storyline should never have been created in the first place. You could have had Undertaker saying, I'm going to take over your company. No issue. But I think trying to claim that he answers to someone else is where the biggest issue comes in the storyline.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't seem as easy as it looks. What they should have done was Taker should have just been the leader. Taker should have been the leader, and Shane should have just bankrolled it, and that's that. And we ditch the rest, because trying to have somebody, being Taker's boss, I guess, you would have really had to, again, have somebody that was pretty, had some gravitas. But otherwise, you should have just had Shane, and Vince could have been, Vince could have just been distraught, and you know what I mean? Like, you could have had him in a situation where he was really begging and he was really pleading with Austin, I need you to help me. And, it's kind of like the invasion 2 years later when, we almost got the old Stone Cold, I don't need cookies and songs. I need the old Stone, like that.
Yeah.
But I think look, I need you to help me. You love this. You want to be the boss in this company where if you let this happen, there's no company for you to be champion of. Kind of thing. I'll look
absolutely.
to your Vince could cut a promo with Stone Cold saying, listen, you want to beat me. You want to be the top dog in this company. You want to be WWF champion. Well, guess what? If you don't help me take these guys out, there's not going to be a company for you to be champion for. That kind of thing. So maybe in the grand scheme of things, that storyline probably should never have happened.
I guess this is where we bring it back to the question I laid out as we entered the Looking Glass today.
Uh-huh.
In the end, when all is said and done, could it have been anyone other than Vince? Because honestly, does anyone other than Vince fit the role of someone that The Undertaker would be subservient to? Because Vince was the boss. And I bring the argument, we've just been saying it, that really they shouldn't have done it because The Undertaker's not subservient to anyone. We've done this higher power storyline. As horrible as a letdown as it was, I honestly think in the end, Vince may have been the best option they had available because he's the only person that at least the fans were willing to say Undertaker would answer to him.
Right.
Because Undertaker wouldn't answer to anyone else, but he would answer to Vince. Now, as I said, it means that the reality is that the storyline, if you want to do this high power thing, you needed to manipulate the storyline a bit better, not make it so clear, not make it so evident that it was a hot shot ending. You could have done stuff earlier on, like, maybe not the kidnapping stuff, but you could have done stuff where Vince was. It becomes, when you look back on it, Vince was always in the know. You can look back, like the Shane thing, you can at least go, yeah, they were working everyone. I can get that. But it's the stuff he did with Stephanie and the begging of Austin to help him out and all that. That doesn't work. But he could have done it in ways that maybe was less sympathetic. Like you were saying, I need you. There's not going to be a company if you let this happen. Austin gets himself in a bad spot, loses the title, and Vince is coming out going, I manipulated you, Austin. I tricked you into taking that title match that you didn't want to take. And I got my title back off you. You if they just play with some elements of the story, we might not have been sitting there going, damn it doesn't work. But yeah, McMahon, I think, is the only one who would have worked.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny how one of the choices we have is no choice at all. Just have Taker have it be between Taker and Shane, and maybe Vince and Austin work together. It'd be a little weird, but it might have been a fun. And then Triple H just kind of does his own rise to the
top. He just continues his storyline of his rise to the top.
Yeah,
I don't need anyone anymore. I don't need DX. I don't need anyone. I'm just going to do it.
Yep, and we can't forget Rock. He's slowly moving up. So, yeah. I mean, if anything, Austin could probably have put the title away, and maybe that would have been a storyline for Rock and Triple H. I don't know. But if you don't have any higher power at all, and it's just Shane and Taker running that crew, I think you would have gotten I think there would have been some good traction. But I think if we were going to do it, my personal opinion is the two best options are, in my opinion, of who we've had, Ted DiBiase and Jake the Snake. There were rumors. The other two names, and I don't want to really delve too deep into it because I think they both would have been poor choices. One was Shawn Michaels, which would have been pretty stupid because that just would have made no sense. Because Shawn's been in and out anyway, and number two, and I would love to have seen him back in the WWF, but this role would have not been him, and that's Randy Savage. Savage in 1999 WWF would have been fucking great, but not in this. Savage isn't that kind of guy. He's not a leader of a faction. Savage only cares about Savage. So ruining Vince and all that, that would not have worked.
Well,
he was a good follower, not a good leader in that aspect.
I agree with that. Another name that I heard thrown around at one stage, and I think it fits in that sort of thing you were just saying there about, don't really fit, is Ric Flair. You know, he at least had the history of being a leader of a faction, but he doesn't fit the Ministry of Darkness. He doesn't fit a higher power. He's the kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying son of a gun.
Son of a gun, exactly.
So he's not the evil manipulator. He's not the. So that's I don't think he would work either.
No, he's just not that. So I think of the choices we've discussed tonight, Dave, I think the two best, if there was options, I think would have been Ted DiBiase for the money and power perspective, and Jake the Snake for the mindfuck perspective of getting in Vince's head and driving him mad while taking his company over. So
no, I agree with that. I think the best option of the lot for being able to make it work would have been Jake. I think he could have made it work. I just worry about him making it work so well that the crowd would turn him babyface again. But vice versa, I worry that trying to bring the evil character in after having been off TV for a couple of years, and the last time the fans saw him was the aging preacher. I think he would have been facing an uphill battle to make it work. But if anyone could have made it work, it would have been Jake.
Correct. Yep. I agree with you 450%. Yep. Dave, that was pretty great. Once again, you. This is why he's the brains and I'm just the brawn. No, Dave comes up with the best topics, folks, and this was a good one tonight because we almost said this is the first time, Dave, that I think one of our choices was just don't do it. But great topic. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I think that's a fun one because that's always been discussed. In many circles about the greater power, the higher power, and whether it was even worth it. And in the grand scheme of things, the legacy of the storyline is probably shouldn't have happened. But it did. We got the great scenes with Steve dumping the horse shit in Vince's office. You know, we got the King of the Ring match, but then we did get Steve winning the belt back the next night on Raw, and then, down the line. So there we go. So, folks, another episode in the books. Thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate it. Dave, where can everyone find you?
Everyone can you can link up with me on Facebook. You'll find me lurking the pages, Dave Hall, and feel free to hit me up, send me a message, reach out. I'd love to chat. Love catching up with people. I really, I think like everyone, we all love it when our egos get stroked and people, flick through some feedback. So we always love to hear from you guys and interact. You'll also hear me. I just earlier today, before we recorded this, I've just recorded an episode. I'll be appearing on the next episode of Johnny C and the Multiverse of Fabulousness over on the North South network.
Oh,
so check that out. We've had a lot of fun with that, and it's sort of another little rebooking element. We've gone back to 1995 and rebooked In Your House 1. So the very first In Your House. So I encourage you, probably by the time they'll probably drop not long after this episode drops. So I encourage you, if you enjoy what we do here, go and listen to that episode. And I had a lot of fun doing that. And I'm going to get to join you again very soon, Scott, in another world. I'm going to be making a little appearance with you and Justin very soon.
Yes, you will be joining us later on down the line, Dave, over on the Mothership. Of course, the Flamethrower, known as the Place to Be podcast. You'll be joining us sometime later this year for an episode. We won't tip our hat as to which one. We like our listeners to be surprised when we. Of course, you're really not surprised, I guess, because you can read the write-up before. So I don't know why I always think that way, but maybe that's just me. Anyway, Dave Hall will be with JR and I later on in the year for the Place Be podcast. Of course, you can follow me personally on Twitter at Scott C. Podfather. You can follow the brand on Twitter. Please do at PTBN Wrestling. We do polls. We do updates on podcasts. As a matter of fact, reach out to me. You could private message me as well on Twitter. Again, at Scott C. Podfather. And also message Dave and give us some of your ideas of alternate universe looking glass topics you would like to see Dave and I talk about. You don't mind, Dave, getting some feedback?
I'd love the feedback. Love to get any ideas, anyone out there. If there's things you guys want to hear, well, we'd love to be able to give. We want to give you what you want to hear. So we're all about giving. We want to give the audience what they want.
Yes, we do. We absolutely do. And for those that are new, and just to let you know, I wasn't going to do it, but since we did kind of throw it out there for the audience, we have done. Here we go. All right, so I wasn't going to do it, but I guess I'll do it now. For those that are new, we've done an episode on, just so people have ideas. We did CM Punk 2011-2012. We did What If Montreal Didn't Happen. We did Goldberg Streak. We did a Royal Rumble episode, various Royal Rumble topics. We did Ultimate Warrior's 1990-91 World Title Reign. We did a WrestleMania episode, which Dave and I will probably do a WrestleMania episode every year. It just changed the topics a little bit. We did an episode on the late, great Scott Hall and how to make him a champion. And then last month's episode, we talked about turning John Cena heel. So if everybody thought, oh, what a great episode for us. Well, guys, we just did it. So if you haven't listened to it yet, please do. It was our episode in May, and it was a lot of fun. Every episode Dave and I do was fun. So of course, we will have a topic set for our July episode, and we will get to the point. I'm already reaching out to a few people, Dave. Eventually here on the show, we will have a third guest, maybe join us. Maybe there's an episode where I can't be on and Dave hosts and we get a special guest or something of that nature. But we might get some guests on. Of course, those episodes will be, 8 hours because Dave and I alone take up a juicy 2.5. But in any event, but please reach out to us. Again, you could find me on Twitter at Scott C. Podfather, the brand on Twitter at PTBN Wrestling. And of course, reach out to Dave on Facebook Messenger and give us some of your ideas of what looking glass topics you'd like us to cover. I know one is coming up in the hopper that we haven't touched yet, and I think July might be a good month for it. We'll talk offline, Dave, but I have a good idea. So in any event, everybody have a wonderful rest of the month of June. Have a wonderful here in the States. Have a very safe and pleasant 4th of July weekend, and we'll talk to you in July.